Hey Ty, since this will be starting Animal Crossing tonight, do you have advice on how to best create flashcards for the huge amount of words I'll be seeing? Ooh, that is a very good question. And there is a lot to doing that question. Okay, so first off, with Animal Crossing specifically, because I've played the Switch version myself, the beginning, they have a lot of really formal language. So you're going to be running into a lot of stuff that you might not be familiar with, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think the best way, we'll go to our custom flashcards here. If you don't already have custom flashcards set up, here, I'll show you how to do it. So you can go into tools, you got flashcards, and then you just create a new deck here. And then once you create a new deck, you'll have a couple options, and then you name it and whatnot. And then you hit browse this deck. So let's say we created my deck right here. So Mesase. You would just activate the deck at the bottom once you have a couple cards in it, by the way. So you add card. Now, Animal Crossing has Furigana, so it's going to be a lot easier to add stuff than a game without it. So basically, what I usually do is I'll just if I run into something that I don't know, I'll just type the whole sentence. これは例文で let's add the formality. ございます. All right, so this is an example sentence. And then maybe I don't know what 例文 is, which is the example sentence. So I'll have that target word, boom. And I'll also set the Furigana for it. So with these two brackets, and then you would type in 例文. But let's say we just ran into this sentence. We don't know what any of these words are, right? So we go to jisho.org, type the sentence in Jisho. You get the readings for it up here. Usually they're correct, not necessarily always, because it might think some word is attached somewhere else. Kore, you can look up that. So let's say we didn't know what Daebun was. So now we know what Daebun is. Here's the Furigana up here. I will usually copy and paste instead of type Furigana myself in case that I make a typo. So instead of actually typing this, I'll type in Daebun, I'll copy and paste it. And then I'll go back to here. Not always all of the definitions, because sometimes there's like 8 or whatever. But the ones that seem the most relevant, I'll at least take. Might be the first like 3 or so, So yeah, now we have that filled in. And then up here in the top left is where we found it from. So for you would write Animal Crossing. And then translation, when the game doesn't give me a set translation, or say I'm studying from a grammar book or something like that, they'll have a set translation. Then I'll chuck it in there sometimes. But I try not to translate things that I find in the wild. If I do really want to take a stab at it, not adding a translation had never crossed my mind, but totally makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so sometimes you do want to take a stab on it, and sometimes it's cool to see when you review them later how much your translation has changed. So you can take a stab at it, and then when I take a stab at it, I make it obvious that it's my own translation. So I'll do like something like put it in 2 parentheses. This is my translation from my brain. And it's really obvious to me. Like when I see this, I'm like, oh, these 2 parentheses mean that this is coming straight from my brain when I ran into this sentence. So I shouldn't rely on this being correct. And it's actually really fun to go back to the cards that I made when I first started studying Animal Crossing. And they weren't usually that on point. So yeah, when you're looking back in like 2-3 years and you look at this translation, you're like, wait, I know exactly what the sentence means, but past me kind of didn't. It's really nice to see your growth that way. And then you would hit add card. Yeah, and if you have any notes, like you can also add that. So like I found this while talking to Shizue. So one of the characters in there. Let's see if we can find any. I think I did this. So this is a peek at my old cards actually. Oh boy. I used to separate stuff with like that little separator for what part of the kanji would be reading, and it's like don't do that. It's not worth it. It's just kind of burning your time. This I'm pretty sure I actually translated and didn't mark because lazy me back then. But this is an unnatural translation. How would I translate this now? So they're probably talking about like trading an item or something. All right, let's get to it and swap this or something like that kind of translation. So how do custom decks fit in with daily studies on NS? Just an extra credit thing I should do after my daily studies. Custom decks, I always recommend doing with your studies. So I always do my custom decks every day. I would say after you complete your lesson, if you're going to do a new lesson today, we are exploring ways to insert custom decks into the flow. Probably we want to do it after you hit the progress here. I always do, after I'm done with my today's studies, I just do study custom decks. My cards are kind of weird because I read a lot of ReZero and all my vocab words are from ReZero. So they're all a little weird. weird. So Akumio Dakai. I think that's Fire Emblem, right? Yeah, that was Fire Emblem. See, okay, this is the other cool thing is I remember this is from Fire Emblem because like I added it to my flashcard. I know where I learned this word from, and I think that's just really cool. So this is basically famously bad. Yeah, infamous. And I have a Japanese translation here, and I'm kind of sad at myself for it. Whenever I have a Japanese translation and like no English on the card, it just makes life so much more difficult. I did it for a little bit before I realized it really was hurting me a lot more than it was helping me. The original idea behind it is, oh, well, then you have to read more Japanese, right? But the thing is, flashcards should be very, very quick. If you're spending a lot of time on your flashcards, you're not doing them quick enough. Probably shouldn't spend more than maybe 10, 20 seconds on a single flashcard. There's some students who will spend like minutes on a flashcard. Well, I get it because we want to make sure we know everything, and that's completely understandable. I definitely did the same thing before I learned the hard way that wasn't probably the best way to do it. It's kind of stressful to get flashcards and wrong and always be just messing with them. You're like, I gotta hit the frowny face or the cry face, and it's just not worth it. You will continue to see these words. These words will come up in your flashcards again. If they're important, you'll run into them in real life or in your studies, because if you're like me, then you have video games instead of exposure in real life up until I moved to Japan. But you'll see them. You'll see them. You'll see them as you advance more in your NativShark studies. You'll see them as you advance more in your native material studies. And if you're talking with a bunch of people, then you'll see them there too. So yeah, that's basically, I think that's the gist of it. Do Japanese to English on flashcards. Make your life easier. All of my flashcards that I did Japanese to Japanese, I struggled with all of those words significantly more for a much longer period of time, and I didn't really gain anything from it. So can't recommend. Japanese to Japanese is good when you have two words that are extremely similar and you're like, okay, well, what the heck is the difference of these words? The dictionary is giving me the same word. What's the actual difference? Then you read the Japanese definition and this becomes very clear. So actually, in cases like that, I will put in the notes the Japanese definition. Like you saw actually when I edited that card, the Akimyo Dakai, I put it in the notes because I'm like, if I want some super great clarification, then the Japanese to Japanese is good. But that's all it is clarification. It shouldn't be your baseline. Hopefully that was helpful. I always love questions like that because I am very much a nerd. Like when I learned Japanese, it was NativShark, the old system of NativShark, and then as my core, and then video games. So I'm very familiar with learning from video games. So if anyone has any video game learning questions, always feel free to ask me. Reach out to me in Discord, like #games. We have a channel dedicated for that. Or stop in the stream and ask me live, because you can definitely get me rambling, as I'm sure everyone already knows by now.